and really excited for today's discussion. So, for those of you I haven't met or anyone who's new to talk, my name is Bill Fanning. I'm part of the team that helps lead the organization, and really excited for today's conversation because I'm a big believer in assessments and especially technical assessments, and excited to talk about it and get everyone's thoughts and feedback and um, uh, ideas. So, couple things really interesting before we get started. I just wanted to let me get this working. By the way, if you are new to talk, I would really encourage you to explore the platform. Within there, you can see forums, you can see polls, you can see some of our past discussions in video form, and the member directory gives you a great ability to find people in your area or in your industry that you can connect with for networking and idea sharing and things of that nature. For the respect of time, I'm not going to go in and do a quick overview or walkthrough, but if anyone has any questions or ever has any ideas about talk, in the upper right-hand corner, there's a chat button, and please feel free to connect with me, share anything you'd like. Always welcome ideas and feedback in terms of how we can do better. Right. So, a couple quick notes before we get going. We have a really awesome event that I'm excited about that we're doing in June of this year. And it's going to be in Scottsdale, Arizona. And we're doing it in conjunction with the Talent Collective, which is run by Natalie Stones and Krista Scarborough-Tan. And we're really trying to put together an event to solve a challenge we heard at some of the events this year, which is it's just a bunch of vendors on stage talking about, in a way, their product. This is a practitioner to practitioner conference. The people who are speaking are fellow TA leaders from different size companies that have similar backgrounds, solve similar problems. And so it should be a really engaging experience. And plus, we've tried to factor in a lot of non-trade show type of events like food tastings and wine tastings and making it a really fun event. So my goal is that everyone who attends gets on a plane when they leave and they have learned something, they've grown their network, and they don't feel like I usually feel when I leave Las Vegas on a plane, completely drained and de-energized, like you have some energy and you had a great time. The other thing I just wanted to ask is, and I'll put the link in the chat, but we every week try and highlight a member of the talk community in our new newsletter. Hopefully that's been a good improvement for everyone. Anybody in your network, if you ever have anyone you think you'd like to nominate, I'd love to learn more about some of the individual members in the community. So I'll drop the link in the chat in a second, and you'll have an ability to nominate or suggest anyone you'd like. And I'm making good progress on relaunching the boards within talks and doing more local events. So I'll have more about that soon, but I just wanted to touch on it for a second because I know it's taken longer than expected. Sometimes those projects do, but we are making good progress. So, wanted to introduce a sponsor for today's discussion, Ken Schumacher. He's the founder and CEO. You obviously spell check failed me today. I'm typing too fast, but I met Ken. Was it at Unleash or HR Tech?
I think it was HR Tech.
HR Tech.
Yep.
But I really, really liked his approach to delivering assessments that test somebody's skill set for the job that they're applying for, not just general terms, and create a very powerful end user experience for the candidate so they're happy and they feel like they've been respected. I know in past hiring, I've put people through assessments and I had a bunch of people not take them. I had a bunch of people feel kind of like they weren't appropriate or they weren't to their skill set. And it really left kind of a delta between what I wanted the experience to be and what it was. And that's not a positive hiring experience. And one of the things on a side note, I think that's really important here is with the automation of technology coming more and more into the hiring process, the human interaction that we have with our candidates is, I think, over time going to reduce. So the quality of the interactions and the things we're using really start to communicate our employer brand much, much more than they have in the past. And so I think that's one of the things as we think about assessments that's really important. So one of the other things that I wanted to talk, I think, is why assessments are so popular. And by the way, I've seen this firsthand. This is how my son applies for jobs. He copies and pastes the job description into ChatGPT. Then he attaches his resume in Word to that thing and says, make my resume perfect for this job. And then it comes back, he downloads it and he sends it out. So because of that, so I tried to use ChatGPT a little bit for this call because we're going to talk about technical assessments. And that's how ChatGPT looks at it. The other thing I thought was really interesting is the rise of assessments over the last 25, 30 years. We were at a point in 1990 that only about 20% of people who were in an interview process were going through assessments. Today, we're at about 93, 94% in 2025. And pretty soon, I think it'll just be the default aspect of how we go through an interview process. And I think the way my son cheats on his resume creation could be really part of why people are getting much more into assessments, because you need to validate the skill set. It's mission critical. So I'm going to shut my PowerPoint off. I thought that was really interesting, and shut my screen share off so we can just all see each other. And yeah, so before we get going, I'm really curious. Technical assessments, I'm sure we're all using them. Anyone have any opinions on them or how they're working? You feel free to drop it in chat, share it with the group. Love to just get a little bit of feedback on the assessment process that you guys are experiencing. Anyone? Don't make me call on you. I know you guys are using assessments. Crystal just jumped in through chat that their IT department uses them to turn the level that they bring a person in and not a hire, which that's awesome. That's what I would expect, and kind of right there. So, Ken, I wanted to just give you a little bit of an opportunity to introduce yourself and maybe share a little bit about the genesis of ropes, which is a really cool concept in technical assessments. What was the impetus to do this? What are some of the things that you learned as you were building it? And really just learn a little bit more about it.
Yeah. Thanks, Bill. I'm super excited to talk to you guys. I could talk about that for an hour alone. It's been a very interesting process. Little on me. I'm the founder of Ropes. We started the company about 2 years ago. I was actually an engineer, so I was relatively new to the whole recruiting world. And over the last couple of years, have learned a lot more. But I was an engineer at a hot tech startup here in New York called Retool. My job was awesome. I was kind of like the AI hacker in residence, for lack of a better word. I basically just kind of went into work all day, built cool AI projects, and left.
By the way, Ken, I'm literally using Retool right now to check people in for the event. So, but go on, don't let me stop you. Cool, cool product.
If there's any bugs, it's all my fault. Most likely. My job was so awesome over there, except for 1 hour a day. I got pulled out of my desk. I sat in like a phone booth like this, and I gave our live, engineering interview. The question was posted widely online, so all of these really smart, Stanford 21-year-olds all could go on Glassdoor, find it, come in, crush the interview. And I kind of looked around like, what are we doing here, right? And you look around. As an engineer, I've gone through, all of the legacy assessments that I'm sure a lot of you guys are all familiar with. And it kind of goes back to what Bill said. It's just not a fun experience. So the goal with Ropes was to use AI. I think we all understand the value of assessments, but use AI to build an assessment that is high quality, right? So one that you can trust as an evaluator, right? But is also great for candidates. And that's kind of how we got to here today. Oh, I did see Crystal's note, which I think is like really interesting. So, like a lot of times in the original assessments, it's all kind of pass fail, right? Like it's like a sort of binary decision, which of course is like the opposite of a live interview, right? On a live interview, we watch how Bill's answers questions, right? We watch his thought process. We can see, is Bill really excellent? Is he good? Is he okay? There's a lot more to an interview than just kind of like the, sample pass fail. Probably should talk about like what the hell Ropes is. There's really two sides of the platform. So first is we evaluate candidates like people, is what we like to say. We really evaluate just like a live interview would, not just if you can get the final answer at the end of a technical assessment, but how that candidate got there. So after every assessment, we generate a scorecard that looks just like what like a live human might write if they were kind of in that interview. The natural question is like, okay, that's great, but like, what are they being evaluated on, right? Like, what do these problems look like? And the short answer is problem looks like lots of different things. We don't have a giant library of, JavaScript problems, Bill picks off problem, 350. Instead, we generate problems unique to your job descriptions. So all you've got to go is just kind of like going to ChatGPT, you go onto Ropes, you paste in a job description or you paste in a role you're trying to hire for, and Ropes will actually go ahead and create that assessment custom to you. So yeah, there's kind of two parts of the platform. You have like that custom side and then how people are evaluated. And I go on that wrong monologue because one way it's used is not just to say, is this person good or should we keep them through the hiring funnel or not? But after someone gets through, how should they be leveled, right? Is this a junior engineer, senior engineer, staff engineer? Getting that kind of like holistic evaluation goes a long way. But yeah, curious to hear more opinions.
Awesome. So that was one of the reasons that I was really impressed when I got a chance to meet Ken and look a little bit at Ropes, because its dynamic ability to generate an assessment for the job, for the role that somebody's coming in on the fly, and be able to do it for somebody without a technical background like me. I think that's awesome. Right. I found that to be a very interesting and effective idea and use of AI. So I'm, somebody dropped something. Hang on, let me just. Bishop, thanks for dropping that in there, and we'll definitely the community can definitely help. On a side note, the other thing I would mention, Bishop, is drop it as a forum chat so everybody can see it. That's a really great way to network. You're looking for a role, so the forum is awesome, but this is a great way to do it too.
Thank you.
Oh, no problem. I'd love to help. It's never a fun process to go through. So, so I'm curious, as people are using assessments today, one of the things that I had struggled with was kind of the response from the applicant. As you guys are going through that process of assessing or talking to applicants that have gone through the assessment process, like Crystal, like your IT department is doing it, what's your reaction? Is it positive? Is it just like another step? I'm always curious how people feel as you ask them to prove the skill set they've told you they have. And love to get some feedback on that as you guys, as we start kind of thinking about the different assessment models that are out there. That's really interesting, Crystal, that you let your candidates use any resource that's out there. And the reason I say that is because I know one of the challenges that I've started to read a lot about is the tools that applicants are using during the interview process to answer questions, both real time and in a coding assessment. And so when you think about asking somebody to prove their skill, it's interesting to me whether if they're using one of those supplemental solutions that can be partnered with you on a Zoom call or be partnered with you doing an assessment, is that really a validation of their skill, or is it just again a kind of a perpetuation of how people move things around? Ken, how have you kind of run into some of that stuff as you started introducing people to Ropes?
Yeah, I think like the question, and this comes up a lot, similarly, is like cheating or like how do you use external tools or like, at Ropes, we're doing a lot of hiring. And when engineers get here, guess what? You're using AI every day on the job, right? So if somebody knows how to go use AI really well on an assessment, great. They're probably going to do the same thing when they're working next to us here. And I think I saw some people have brought up kind of like take homes or that sort of thing. This is like really on par with like how Ropes works. So Ropes is not a 20 question multiple choice test, right? It's not even a come in and reverse this list. It's very take home or real world, right? Like, so I saw somebody I think mentioned like DoorDash, which I used last night. If DoorDash submitted a role, the question might look like, here is a mock DoorDash app. We need to build in a new feature that alerts customers when their order might be delayed, right? What you get there is it's, first of all, I come in as a candidate. This is not going to be an 8-hour test, right? This is adding a notification or adding something simple. But we're actually testing a lot, right? Like, do you know how to comprehend a repository? Do you write quality code? Again, very stuff that like your actual engineering team is going to care about day to day. As a candidate, I find that a lot more interesting too, right? If I'm applying to DoorDash, I'd rather work on something that's DoorDash related. Why I bring this up is it's a very different type challenge and one that ChatGPT is not quite as good at. When you're adding a new feature, there's a lot of context, we call it. There's a big repository. There's a lot of stuff that you'd have to try to copy and paste. So in practice, it's very hard to cheat on ropes tests. For that reason, over half of our customers allow AI usage in the actual assessment. So candidates are free to pull in stuff from Google, Stack Overflow, again, just like they would on the job. The only caveat is ropes will still show you, hey, can you use Stack Overflow on these sections, right? Like even as an evaluator, I probably still care, how somebody uses those external tools. But yeah, to the community's point, I think that's often an advantage or looked at as a positive, not a negative. And that's kind of reflected in the platform.
Cool. We have a question with Austin, had your hand raised, so want to give you the floor.
I see Aaron asked a question down here. So at DoorDash, we created in-house technical assessments based off of front-end, back-end, mobile. They're created by the dev teams though, right? And then Aaron also mentions like codility. So kind of like the big differences. But yeah, so and then the second part there, like candidate using AI. So I'll kind of work backwards and forwards. So like I mentioned like how ropes can track external content, but like how does that really work? There's kind of like two sides of this. One is like a quantitative side and one is a qualitative side. On the quantitative side, there's kind of like table stakes in the industry, right? So every time a candidate switches tabs, for example, or pastes in code or copies code, all of that stuff is tracked by ropes and then is shown on kind of that final report. As you guys all know, though, on this call, and I know because I was this candidate one day, or many days ago, candidates are savvy, man. They know how to find their way and bypass these things. We've seen people use their phone, ChatGPT, and take video and all sorts of like stuff, right? The way we kind of cover that in cases where we do care about external content is what we call like these qualitative checks. The way I often explain it is if I was doing a coding test in front of you guys, and not even everyone here is technical, right? But if I was muted and I was just working and you were just watching me work, you could probably tell if I was cheating. Like, what would that look like, right? If I hit something hard and then I just don't do anything for a while, and then I start, writing out code at the same pace, like there's kind of these obvious cadences that we look for. So ropes will do both. Ropes will give you the quantitative stuff on was there anything weird going on, and then qualitatively, like, hey, is there just anything suspicious that you might want to take a look at? And our customers find it works pretty well. Kind of going backwards on the whole DoorDash thing. So I love this. Like there are a couple teams, Stripe is like my favorite example, where these teams gone above and beyond to create these world-class engineering assessments. And that is awesome. Like we want every organization to be able to take the time to do that. In reality, that doesn't happen, right? And I'm sure a lot of you have engineering teams that you've probably nagged to be like, hey, we need to update our take home, or we need a new assessment for this role. And engineering teams aren't necessarily super fast to get on it. I can always resonate with them because I am an engineer. Recruiting wasn't my favorite thing to do either, right? The goal with ropes is not to exclude the engineering team, right? They care about their hires at the end of the day. It's people they're working with. what we want to give our recruiters is the ability to generate a draft of this completely self-serve, right? So I may not know a whole lot about React or JavaScript, but I can come in, paste in a JD, and get a draft of an assessment to go send to our engineer. What ends up happening for that engineer is instead of having to take 2 days to draw up something from scratch, I can look at Bill and be like, hey, you know what, this looks great. Here's my check mark. Let's send it off. We're really kind of big on empowering that. I think it's great for both sides. So yeah, Aaron, kind of the goal is to provide every company that same quality of assessment across the different roles that you had at DoorDash. Yeah, no, my pleasure, man.
Awesome. And Crystal had a question around ensuring there's no bias in something like a qualitative chat.
Yeah, bias is a huge part of the platform, right? So I think like the title of the talk is effective but fair, right? And we've covered a lot on effective. I actually think part of fairness is baked into that challenge itself, right? As an engineer, I don't think it's very fair to ask somebody some brain teaser, right? Like, it's not related to job. There are people really great at that job that you're probably filtering out versus people that have practiced these random brain teaser problems for years might be doing better at, right? So part of the fairness is just trying to keep the assessment techniques similar to the techniques that are going to be necessary when you're on the job. That's part one.
Mm-hmm.
Part two, though, is when we do these evaluations, right? Like usually there may, either recruiters looking it over it, or sometimes it's an automated score. We got to make sure that's fair. Ropes does a lot of like anti-bias work, so I could bore you with all the auditing that's done and that sort of thing. But a lot of it comes from how we structure these assessments. So Ropes is never going to tell you, Ken seemed extra motivated, or, Ken had the great eagerness to learn. Like these are things that I really worry about in AI, kind of like evaluating somebody on self-serve. What an AI can tell you, though, is like, this is good code quality, or this is bad code quality. The same way I could tell you that. There is a accepted standard, right? In the same way there is a efficient solution and a poor solution. So when we do these automated evaluations, sure, it's AI, it's more advanced, but we keep it grounded to things that have a right answer and a wrong answer, or more commonly, a set of right answers and a set of wrong answers. So yeah, effective but fair there's both are like very important, and I think they kind of combine together, right? Like as a recruiter, I'd much rather use something that I know is going to treat everybody equally and is closer to the job. So those two things often get wrapped into one.
Awesome. So I'm curious for everyone on the call and the assessment tools you're using. One of the challenges that I've had is I'd send the assessment out and people would disappear. And I'm curious if that's an issue you guys, if anyone on the calls had, and if you got feedback on what it was, in the circumstances where the most common answer that I received individually was that people found it to be not a good use of their time. Like it was insulting, or you asked me to come in and be a senior developer, and you sent me something a high school kid should do. And so that was mine. Oh, Doreen's back. Doreen, I'd love to hear your question.
Sure. So, well, actually, I just think it all goes with the approach with the candidate. I think having a structured process in place, like at TCW, we don't really have. We don't really use assessment tools, and if we have, I've had to like create them manually. And it's not that I think that that's the best way of doing it. I think that something that's more. I think they just end up working it out with the candidate themselves but I think that when it comes to like an assessment, and regardless of the level of the candidate, as long as they're aware of the process, and you from the get-go, so from the screening call, and ensuring that, because if somebody has it has to be a fair process across the board, and everybody needs to be treated the same. And regardless, and I've heard stories, quite frankly, about rather recently, especially in the day and age with all the remote interviewing, for a candidate have interviewing throughout the whole process, and this is an engineering role in Los Angeles. Somebody told me about, a recruiter told me about, ended up getting the job, and a different person came on site to start, and they didn't think they would figure it out. I mean, things have gotten quite dicey, and they can get, and then we've also had candidates, and this being like interviewers at TCW, where you can tell that they're getting something, because they're remote, they have headphones in, and they're getting answers. And I've also noticed, that people you could tell that they think you don't hear them typing and like searching for things as you ask them. So, but I just think that ultimately it's really about the approach. And if a candidate, can't appreciate the process, that this is the process, and they have the wrong attitude about it, that's one thing, then you have your answer there, that they're probably not going to be the best cultural fit anyway. But the other aspect is just, my approach is always just being very personable and honest from the get-go. So, I tell them, and they end up telling me the same thing throughout the whole process, that, I say transparency is key. Just please, this is how we do it. Just don't disappear on me. We're having you interview with the business, and we respect your time, and I hope you respect ours. And I think it's really about that, Yeah,
no, I think that's good. And I actually have a couple friends that are recruiters today that have told me that they do the phone screen, and the person on the phone has a perfect dialect for the United States, and then the person who comes to the physical interview has a foreign accent. So I've heard that.
People are getting, things are, it really has to be double, triple vetted,
Yeah.
And, there's only so much I can do from like an assessment. Like I have with every role, because I do recruit, I'm the lead for our engineering solutions team. And so I have them provide me for my screening calls, like after I source a candidate, I share it with them. They tell me who they're interested in. They give me at the time of the intake, a bunch of questions that they want me to do, like from a technical, to ask them from a technical skill set perspective. But there's only so far in depth I can go with it, to do that initial vetting.
Awesome. Austin has his hand raised, and then we'll jump over when Mira will talk about the compensation aspect, because that's really interesting as well. But Austin, go ahead. Okay, so why don't you put it in chat? And then Mira, that's a great question. I have never compensated somebody for their time. I've compensated them for parking and travel expenses, if anything like that exists. But the time investment is not something that I've ever personally seen compensated. But I guess it would come back to, and I'm curious for everyone else's feedback, the amount of time that assessment takes. So if I'm asking somebody to commit hours of their day, then potentially that could be a consideration. But I've never been in that situation. I'm curious, how is anyone else thought through or providing compensation?
This is Abby. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Sure can, Addie.
Awesome. So my name's Abby, by the way. I work for Western and Southern in Cincinnati, Ohio. We're an insurance company, and I support the technical recruiting aspect. So we do have a technical assessment, but I feel like it's still part of the interview process. So we don't reimburse somebody for coming into interview. We would if they're traveling, right? To your point, Bill, we would compensate them for any travel expenses outside of a certain perimeter, but the assessment is still just part of that interview process. And don't get me wrong, you said it as well, interviewing is tough, and it's a lot to I guess take on, but it is still part of that process. And I think that's just one of the things that you may have to assume that you'd have to take if you're going to continue looking or start looking.
Yeah. That's interesting. I definitely could see some people maybe coming in Gen Z, maybe a little bit of a younger generation, thinking or asking to be compensated for their time, but it's not something. Look, if it's something you can do from home on your computer, and you can do it in non-work hours, then the test for me as a recruiter is, how badly do you want the job? If you won't even take the assessment without being compensated, that's a little telling. Sarah, go ahead. And then Mary, you had some additional comments on that, but you raise your hand. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
My name is Sarah Powell. I'm actually a talent acquisition manager for a subsidiary of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. And I kind of wanted to go back to Aaron Katz's question regarding using AI to answer AI-based questions. Wanted to get your thoughts on that, but also how do you determine if a candidate is using AI just in an interview overall? Like what we've noticed are the physical cues, not necessarily verbal, but like you can tell when someone is kind of looking at another monitor or like on their phone or something. So I'm just wondering if anyone on the call has ever experienced candidates using AI to answer interview questions or during assessments, if they're using AI to answer AI assessments.
That's a great question.
Just letting you know that your interview's here. Oh, okay. He's pretty early.
All right. Crystal, that's a great example. They can never get the specific examples. The one way I've seen it is that I've watched the eyes in the stuff. So I ask a question, there's a delay in the response, and their eyes usually continually go to the same direction because some of the Chrome or Zoom overlays sit in a certain side of the part of their screen, so they always look at it. But that has been my personal experience. Anyone else?
I see some examples in the chat. The delay response, we've noticed that, especially as we get into like the intern season, right? Like the younger generation is more familiar with artificial intelligence. So I feel like they're more inclined to use the AI platform versus when you work for a more professional organization and we don't necessarily adapt to those kind of platforms just yet. So we're just trying to find, as a talent acquisition team, a healthy balance to educate hiring leaders on when it is appropriate and necessary to leverage AI during the interview process, and in turns, what kind of barriers, maybe not barriers, probably a bad word to say, but what kind of roadblocks, I don't know what to use for it, but how can we like educate our candidates to say, hey, we're actually not using AI during the interview process, or this interview, we're looking away from using AI. So like there's no like legal ramification to letting a candidate know that they can't use it. But I guess we're just trying to figure out a healthy balance on when to know when it's appropriate, if that makes sense.
That's an interesting question. I think it's very situational, if and when it's appropriate to use. I mean, I've seen people. I mean, I would be okay with people improving their written communication with an AI platform. I mean, I live with Grammarly, so I don't know if that's AI, but that takes my infantry mind and turns it into proper English so other people can understand me, which is always a win. And so that helps quite a bit, but I don't know. I think it really would be tied to what role they're interviewing for, what the process looks like, things of that nature. But it's a great question. Crystal, you got your hand raised?
I wonder if we should be asking the question, how can we embed AI into the interview process? If we are expected to do AI in our jobs, how can we fold it in and get to the meat of it, even if they do use it during the interview process?
That's a really good question. I think it would come down to the job and the role that they're applying for, and whether they're going to be using it or not. But I could see personally giving somebody some type of use case of creating or generating something. So, for example, when I hire senior leaders for sales, marketing, whatever the roles are, I usually give them a project. Show me how you would do X. Show me how you would do Y. Build me a business case, and then come and present it in the development of whatever that presentation is. I would be very okay with them using AI because I think that's what most people do today. Where I would not be comfortable with them using AI is that they would deliver that presentation via Zoom and had it some type of a coaching bot on the side, right? So there's the differentiation for me. If they come and deliver it in person, which is what I prefer, there is no AI in the room, I think, at least today. So that's good. And Mira, that's a great statement that you include the following language. That's really interesting. You support the use of AI for the exercise, but to specify how you used it in the research and output. I think that's really interesting. And Dorian, I think that's exactly, it's time, place, and transparency. Yeah, it's fascinating that. So, I mean, there is a gentleman, I think in the Las Vegas area, towards the middle of last year, received, I think, about $5 million in funding, where he's creating a bot that can take your Zoom interview for you. Wow. So you record yourself a couple times.
Awesome.
And then it just takes the interview for you.
Yeah. I honestly like Aaron's point, which is like, I guess, sad, but AI is not going away. Like, you know what I mean? It's not going to be a problem that goes away next year. So, yeah, I think the key is adapting. But I also think, like, not to keep coming back to what's in my mind all day, but I think Crystal has a good point, which is like, you know, AI, I think in recruiting context, it has a very negative thing. It's like, you know, candidates are using AI to circumvent our process, but we're going to use AI to filter out their resumes. It's like a battle, right? And part of what we are trying to believe in is like using AI in the opposite way, using AI to say, hey, we understand, I think to Abby's point earlier, like interviewing is hard. This is a hard process, right? Like, how can we use AI in the other direction? Two ways that come to mind. First is like, again, Bill, you asked a while about like, why did we even create this in the first place? I'll be honest, I'm not a huge like engineering interview guy. Like I think I'm a pretty good developer, but when I had a technical interview teed up, I was nervous and I didn't always perform my best. I had to schedule it right. So I got to take 2 p.m. out on some random Tuesday to do it right. Part of the goal, again, is like if we can evaluate the same way synchronously that we do live, the candidate can take it from the confine of their home whenever they want without somebody hovering over them, that sort of thing. So yeah, I like Crystal's point on just like how can we flip the script a little bit. And to the same way, you know, again, I think when I think about assessments, a big reason people don't use them is you got to get everything right. I think somebody said they tell candidates like, hey, if you get a 0, that's okay. You might still be considered for the job. That's kind of what we're trying to embrace. Like ropes is not about the result. Sure, I care if you got the problem correct, but really what we care about is your thinking process, right? So I think there's like an underrated point there, which is like AI, I think, is like very adversarial in the recruiting game, but there are ways to kind of flip that script. And part of our goal, at least, is to find those ways and make them available. But it's a super interesting subject.
Yeah. And Aaron, that's a great observation that all of the recruiters that I know are implementing different ways to use AI to improve the speed and accuracy and all the different parts of the interview process. So for us to accelerate a process using AI and to tell somebody that they can't use it when it's definitely going to be part of their job is really kind of I don't know, maybe a little hypocritical. But so I think, you know, setting clear boundaries on what's acceptable and how they can be used is really probably the right way to go at it. Aaron, I think that was a really good observation. I enjoy that. It's
I'll pat myself on the back for that one.
Yeah, you really should. I thought that's really good. Hey, we're using it. I mean, I actually talked with so going to, not to promote Talent Sphere, but I was talking with some people who are going to come out and speak, and the head of TA for Zapier is coming. And they're talking about the fact that they created their own AI engine. So they're not using the public one, and every recruiter is getting different answers. They trained LLM in their own data set. So all of their recruiters can use AI to generate job descriptions, do all this great stuff, but it's going to generate content based on relevant data, a relevant structured data set. So they all get similar answers. So, I mean, not only is everybody going to start using AI, I think what they're doing is very interesting. If you have a team of recruiters that are all using it individually on an open data set, you're all getting different answers. And I think the way they approached it was very interesting. I was fascinated by it. So maybe stepping forward, Ken, talk a little bit about what you see the evolution of the technology, not just yours, but just in general. I think we've definitely ascertained that AI's in the picture. This is a great opportunity to cheat. And if there's a way to cheat, I just ask my son, and he'll tell me, "Look at this, Dad. I barely keyed I didn't write a sentence." But what's coming next? How do you see this growing?
Again, could probably fill another hour. Again, I think the point of like AI is not going away is one thing. The other thing is like AI will only get better, right? And I'm blessed that all my smart engineering friends are working for OpenAI and Anthropic, and they can't really tell me anything, but they come back to our apartment smiling. So something's going on. And more generally, these models are going to keep getting better and better, right? That's why I think it's so important, as the leader of the organization, to try to get ahead of this stuff early. Is if you can figure out this stuff now, you're going to be in a great place in 2026, 2027, when these models are better, becomes easier to kind of get past the process and that sort of thing. Frankly, I think that's we're a team of engineers, right? We are in the recruiting space, but we are an engineering org, and we spend a lot of time on Twitter, and even we have a hard time keeping up with all the innovation going on in this space. But what we try to do is just embrace it as quickly as possible so that our customers can kind of take their hands off the wheel and know that they're getting the best out there in the process, tomorrow. So that's kind of like, I think my high level is like things are going to keep changing. I believe these models are going to get quite a bit better very quickly. So by the end of the year, I think you're going to see a model that can solve very different problems than what we could solve at the start of the year. How does that change the actual roles that you all will be required to the roles that you guys are recruiting for next year? I think like the changes are going to be pretty big. So I guess that's like a very negative message. I think it's like actually quite positive. I think there's like a lot of great stuff that comes out of AI. My suggestion is somebody just uses models all day, is just like use it. Like try AI, go on ChatGPT for one random task a day that you think like, oh, maybe the model can solve this. It's just great to get to know, how to use this stuff, for lack of a better word, because I do think it's going to become a bigger and better part of our lives, and you can use it as an advantage as well. So yeah. I think good stuff is coming.
That's good. There are a couple of the senior TA leaders from Anthropic coming to speak at Townsphere as well. So hopefully they'll be able to share a little bit more than just a smile.
They're pretty tightly knit on what they share, but there's definitely good stuff coming.
Yeah, awesome. And Austin, I think that's interesting that you provide the coaching and get them geared to go take the assessment and be able to still identify the skill set. One of the ways that I've always asked people to answer questions is how they got to that answer and to test their logic and thinking. So I've always done that, and maybe that's an interesting way when somebody answers or provides an interesting way to solve a problem. How did you get there? With somebody developing a solution for you, I'm sure going back to, there was one comment that somebody made, Crystal, I think it was you, they can't give specific examples. They're very generic in their response to, how did you do this? So that's really interesting. From a platform standpoint, there's a myriad of there's a myriad of assessment tools that have been on the market over time. And one of the things that I've always wondered is if they're still delivering quality or accurate assessments, and they're maintaining the questions, the content that they're evaluating people on. If you're using a tool, and I've used several on the market, some of them have large libraries of assessments. They're great, but they need to maintain timely. Is that something that anyone else has ever had a challenge with? Is that the assessment? I mean, in the velocity of change in technology today is probably faster than it's ever been. So a year-old assessment may still need to be updated to remain relevant or valid in the process. Has anyone had that challenge, or is that something anyone's thought about?
This is Abby again.
Yeah.
So yes, actually, this is a challenge that I have as an individual going up against the leaders within our organization. So our assessment is an aptitude assessment. So we only have developer candidates completed, developers, software engineers, programmers, whatever. It is the same assessment no matter what level we're interviewing them for. We have 6 levels of developers. And it's not even an actual coding assessment. Again, it's an aptitude assessment. I've heard it's pretty math-based, which I can see the correlation there. But what I struggle with is, I will talk with a candidate, recent college graduate, ready to start their career. They've had no actual work experience. They're passing these assessments with flying colors. I'm talking like 99 and 100%. And then I've got a developer on the phone that has been developing for 20 years. And I've got positive references from him, and he fails the assessment. And it's very frustrating because I want to move forward with that 20-year experienced developer who I know is going to come in and just hit the ball out of the park. And so, they just haven't taken a test in a long time. And so that's what I struggle with. We've been using the same assessment I've been on this team for 3 years. And I know when I joined, they had been using it for 6, I want to say 6 years. And so we're going on 10 years, and I've brought it up every single year. It's on my next agenda with the leaders later this month as we recap 2024. Can we revisit the assessment topic? Sorry. Okay. Yeah. I don't want to take up everybody's time, but it's something I'm pretty passionate about, if you can't tell. So yeah, that's the struggle that I face.
Yeah, I could absolutely see that being a relevant challenge for some of the platforms out there. It's one of the things it was the first thing that really, when I was talking with Ken, I really got excited about. It's dynamically generating a relevant topical assessment based on the role in the job that you're looking at. And I thought that was very interesting. That's a great, Crystal, that's a great question that I'd love to get some feedback on, because I have definitely hired people that have literally crushed an assessment. And 6 months into the job, I'm like, what happened? It just, we just like 2 ships in the night. So I'd be really curious where other people have seen employees failing after the assessment, especially if they've done a really good job on it.
We see this, at least just because we run hundreds of these. We see this a lot when, again, we'll come into an organization when there's misalignment in the assessment versus the end result, right? Like, I think this is exactly Abby's point. When you have an aptitude test, there might be someone who's really great at aptitude, but guess what? They don't understand some very embedded Java technology that they actually need on the day, right? You can kind of like contrast that versus like when we ask a assessment about a very specific technology, candidate does well. Guess what happens on day 7 on the job? They're using the technology, they do well, right? It's all about kind of the alignment. I think the farther and farther you get, that just increases the risk of it's two-sided, right? It's like, one, you are now pushing away candidates that know how to do the job, but don't know how to do your brain teaser test. And 2, the people who happen to be very good at the brain teaser test might not be great at the job. So we find that alignment super important.
Awesome. Aaron, you raise your hand. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Sure. I think in this conversation about, to Crystal's point, like if they don't do well in the role, but they had a great assessment and all that stuff, I think we have to not always be looking at it as a candidate issue, because I've had a ton of friends in the tech world and these big companies, from the Spotify's to Stripe to Amazon's, where unfortunately, maybe they haven't really kind of flushed out what that role needs to look like over the first 30, 60, 90 days, a year, what the projects they're going to work on. So when a role changes for a candidate, they do well on an assessment. Here's how I adapt, and here's my adaptability to doing A, B, and C. They get into the job, and the job is not what was sold to them. So I think it's a twofold where, like, yes, candidates can fail an assessment, do great in assessment, get hired or not hired. But I have seen the flip side where it's really the company that we work for that needs to make an adjustment on what are we assessing for, and are they actually utilizing that in the position that they're going to be occupying? It doesn't always happen, but I have seen it where like 6 months in, it's like the candidate's like, I'm out of here. Like, this is not what you guys told me we were going to be doing. You've changed scope, you've changed priorities, and that happens. But like, I don't know. I think there's a double-edged sword where it's maybe a candidate got through, but also potentially a company was maybe not forthright in what the role actually was going to be.
Yeah, that is something that I've experienced myself, and my takeaway was uber clear definition of what the role is, and then delivering on that when the person comes in, because it sets an understanding. Like when somebody is in an interview process, my thought has always been that they understand this is probably the best we're ever going to treat them. So when they come in and go to work for a hiring manager, they're not going to get the same level of love and attention. And so if somebody walks in day one and they were hired for role A and you deliver role B, it sets this connotation that something was just, it breaks the trust of and the conviction of that employee to come in and do a great job, in my humble opinion. So Aaron, I think that's a great point.
No, I think that just to add to that, just because I was thinking about it, because I've been seeing it happen over the last 3 years, especially like in 2021 when the tech boom and every company was hiring and every company wanted engineers. Over the last 3 years, I mean, raise of hands here. How many reorgs have companies had? How many layoffs over the last 2-3 years where the roles are constantly changing? And so, like, are we assessing for the right things for what that new world is going to look like? Because I mean, you hear it every couple months, another 5,000 at this job, Coinbase does this, like Intuit, another 3,000 people lose their jobs. So it's like with the ever evolving, changing organization, how are we assessing accurately? I'm down for assessments, but if they're like moot or they don't make a point or they're not going to actually add value to what we're currently doing, then we're wasting everyone's time.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. Actually, so does my dog. She's raising her paw right now. But I think it's trying to get something off my desk. So, yeah, it's funny. On a side note, my German Shepherd loves Zoom calls. Second the Zoom call starts, she comes running in and starts wanting to get involved. It cracks me up every time. Guys, we've got a couple minutes left, and Doreen, great comment on the agility and ability to reskill is always something that at least I talk to when I bring somebody on the team. But I wanted to give Ken just a second. I was very impressed by ropes, and I'd love if there's a way, if anyone here wants to learn more, I just wanted to let Ken share a little bit before we wrap everything up around if you wanted to learn more about his specific approach to technical assessments.
Yeah, it was super great meeting you guys. Seriously, I think I could do this all day. It is kind of what I do all day. I just usually do it in my head, not talking to people. But seriously, guys, appreciate all you guys tuning in. You guys now have a good sense of what ropes looks like, but we deploy across all kinds of organizations. I'm going to post my actual my calendar link. So it's not a crazy sales link. It's just meeting with me. I'd love to continue the conversation with you guys, whether it's chopping it up. Often people actually want to see a example of again, it's very easy for us to create these challenges, right? So if you send in a role, you'll get to see what that actually looks like in ropes. Or if you just want to kind of see things at a high level, I love meeting kind of more of the community, especially on Talk and meeting the team. So yeah, don't hesitate. My Calendly's in the chat there. Was super, I'd love to continue the conversation with you guys, but thanks for tuning in. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Guys, thank you. It's a great discussion. I don't know if anyone has any last minute questions or comments, but I really appreciate it. If anyone is in the Austin area, we're having a great dinner next Thursday night. If that's something you want to participate in, just connect with me on chat, let me know, or you can just RSVP for it in the system. but should be a lot of fun and be a great chance to meet some of you face to face. So with that, I'm gonna wrap everything up. Thanks everybody. It was a great discussion. I hope you guys got value from it. Yeah, Sarah, that's part of the reason I said it in Austin, because Boston is a little too chilly for a dinner meeting. So we'll enjoy down there, and we'll hit Terry Black's for some barbecue. So, all right, guys, thank you very much. Really appreciate it, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.